So the third speaker for this session is my friend Dr. Wayne Newhouser. He's the chair of medical physics at LSU. He's a medical physicist and in a former life, or at least he is a trained nuclear engineer, so he covers a lot of the hats that are being discussed today, particularly as he runs the programs in medical physics and health physics at LSU. So Dr. Newhouser will be talking on a review of the workforce for radiation protection in medicine. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'd like to start by thanking the NCRP for supporting my travel here today and for the kind invitation to speak to you this afternoon. Our program does have support from the NRC, but I do not have any personal conflicts of interest. Almost immediately after the discovery of radiation, it was applied to medicine, and as you all well know, to a variety of other industries, nuclear power, and so on and so forth. And the United States has developed this really wonderful, strong, creative, productive community of professionals to ensure that this ionizing radiation is used to the benefit of society in a safe manner. And by now, I think you've gotten the impression from our previous speakers that this looming workforce crisis has been really well documented over the years, and not just by individual authors, but by government agencies and by societies, including the NCRP. There are several disciplines of relevance to radiation protection in medicine. Time will prohibit me from addressing more than two of them. I'll speak to medical physics and medical health physics. But we stand shoulder to shoulder with our colleagues in radiobiology, radiation oncology, and the rest of the disciplines up there on the slide. Really, this is a community, a team, a microcosm, and we function best together when we are all in good shape, healthy, and with adequate numbers in our disciplines. I think it's quite stunning that a conservative, deliberative organization like NCRP issues such a dire warning. And I'd just like to read to you a few statements from the WARP Committee. The U.S. is on the verge of a severe shortfall of radiation professionals such that urgent national needs will not be met. That's quite something. Projected shortfalls will adversely affect the public health, radiation occupations, emergency preparedness, and the environment. So what are some of the factors that are leading to this looming crisis, specifically in the radiation protection workforce in medicine? I'd have to say that cancer incidence is probably the biggest fundamental driver of this. The absolute cancer incidence rate, that is the number of new cancers being diagnosed every year in the United States, is increasing about 2% per year. And this is well established, well known. It's a long-term trend, and this is due mainly to growth of the population and aging of the population. You've heard from earlier speakers that the utilization of radiation is increasing. For example, the use of CT scans seems to be on the uptick again, and this tends to increase demand for radiation protection services. And as new and complex technologies are introduced into the clinic, this too increases the need for medical physics and health physics services in the clinic. And of course, as we make productivity gains, for example, through automation, this decreases the demand for our services. On the supply side, really what we have to work with is the existing workforce, and we'll discuss that a bit more in just a moment. And we're facing a big retirement of baby boomers. And so another major factor on the supply side is what is the capacity of the academic programs to generate replacement workers for those who are retiring or leaving the workforce for other reasons. Of course, this is a much, much more complicated situation than these few factors, and things like healthcare policy, statutes, salaries, and a great number of other factors come into this, which I won't go into here. This slide summarizes for you the relative sizes of the workforces in medical physics. So the American Association of Physicists in Medicine has about 8,000 members, and it's growing. American Nuclear Society, which is home to many of the nuclear engineers in this country, about 11,000 members. And the Health Physics Society is, as Kathy mentioned, has dropped below 5,000, and this has been decreasing for quite some time. So how does this look over time? This is a plot of the membership in the American Association of Physicists in Medicine, and actually things look quite healthy from the mid-1970s, going from about 500 steadily upward to the present day over 8,000. I really don't see any problem here. In fact, this is growing faster than the incidence of cancer, so we're seeing really a growth of our field due to increased utilization of radiotherapy as well, and imaging. Well, you've now seen this infamous slide. This will probably become known as the warp slide, so I won't belabor it. Let's now look at the supply of future workforce professionals, and let's look at this nationally. In 2013, there were roughly 52,000, 53,000 PhDs awarded in all fields. There are about 9,000 awarded in engineering and about 9,000 awarded in the physical sciences. These are not quick degrees. These typically take 6.5, 7 years, something like that. Their proportions are interesting to look at. There are about 169 PhDs in nuclear engineering conferred per year. This represents 2%, less than 2% of all engineering PhDs. For medical physics, it's about 113. This is about 1% of all physical science degrees. And for poor health physics, it's down to about 10 PhDs, which is about 0.2% of all physical sciences. So the absolute numbers here in particular are concerning for health physics, of course, but what's common to all of these fields is they are niche fields. These are small subspecialties, and these pose special problems for each of us, each of our communities. Now let's look at the size and output of medical physics education programs. And I've really kind of down-selected the data to the bare minimum for clarity. And we're looking at this from the standpoint of someone who runs an academic program and who's looking for an indicator of the health of the academic community in medical physics. So what we see is that there are 43 programs, accredited programs, conferring Master of Science degrees in medical physics. Cumulatively, that represents about 162 degrees per year. For PhDs, there are 34 programs conferring collectively 113 degrees. I think for brevity, I'll skip over the postdoctoral certificate training program. But the interesting thing here is that if you look at the number of graduates per year per program, you're seeing very small numbers, 3 and 4. And so to put this in more concrete terms, what this means is that on average, you would expect to see perhaps 3 students in your core courses. This is not a critical mass. This does not have economies of scale. And I don't believe that this is sustainable over time. So why are these numbers so low? 3 and 4 students per program per year. Well, it turns out that there's a ton of students. There's actually a couple thousand students that want to enter medical physics every year. A small fraction are admitted. The thing that's driving that number down is just an explosion in the number of medical physics graduate programs. Here you can see a plot of the number of CAMPEP accredited programs going back to 1988. And what you'll see is in the last 10 years, the number of programs has nearly quadrupled, going from 13 in 2005 to 48 last year. So the growth, just the number of programs out there is what's driving those indicators down. Now let's look at the size of health physics degree programs and their output. What we see is that 13 programs are conferring about 67 Bachelor of Science degrees in health physics. There are about 20 programs conferring about 81 Master of Science degrees in health physics per year, and again, about 10 programs conferring about 10 graduates per year at the PhD level. So once again, we see that these numbers are very small. So as someone in education, this is a warning sign that there's trouble ahead. Another famous slide, I won't belabor this, just to note that it is the graduate enrollment in particular that's been most precipitously declining in health physics since about 2007. Why the big decline? There's a lot of reasons, and many of them have been mentioned already. In fact, you've heard some about research funding. And so I'd like to just say a few words about research funding from the perspective of someone who is a researcher and an educator. Really, the big picture is that our society's priority for research has decreased over time. Since about 1968, the relative fraction of the federal budget devoted to research and development has shrunk from about 10% down to about 4%. If you prefer to measure it in terms of the fraction of GDP, it's about the same. So it's a pretty big decline in terms of how we see research and development as a priority for the nation. How much research funding is there out there? Quite a lot, as it turns out. Perhaps not enough, but quite a lot nonetheless. There's about $65 billion spent on R&D in the United States per year. For the university programs, it's the federally funded research that's really most important to us and really vital to our health and survival. And what you see is that since 2010, this has been in decline. And this is a pretty significant decline here. Okay, $65 billion a year, that's a fair bit. So where's that going in broad categories? Well, I don't think that we can complain too much, at least from 60,000 feet, because the three largest recipients of this are medical sciences, biological sciences, and engineering. So probably medical physics would fit into this category, and it's roughly $20 billion a year. So at least from a very high level, it looks like there's enough, there should be enough funding going to fund medical physics. But what happens is between that high level and the ground level, the money is filtered out. There's a very interesting study done by Steinberg et al. They looked at the number of NIH-funded projects which contained a topic in radiation oncology and/or biology and/or physics. And what they found was that there was just under 200 awards active. This was data from 2013. Most of these awards were held by full professors. Again, this is not boding well for the young people in the field trying to break in, make careers, and make tenure. Interestingly, 80% were for radiobiology projects. Only 13% had a physics topic contained within them. Okay, so this is a pretty small number. So that means out of those 8,000 or so medical physicists, there's probably 26 grants. It's a pretty small number. I'd also like to point out that I'm not in any way trying to imply that radiation biology is getting too much. To the contrary, they're not. It's just that this whole picture is too small. Really strangely, they only found 9 individual training grants. These are the sort of fellowships that would be the equivalent of an AEC fellowship from the old days in health physics. And only 18 institutions had 3 or more investigators with active NIH funding. So that's the data, that's what they found, and the interpretation of this I've summarized here. They identified a critical mass problem for research groups. We all know about that. The low renewal rates for grants jeopardizes the establishment of long-term programs. That's a serious issue in education. And I quote here, the overall state of NIH funding in radiation oncology raises great concern. Many academic radiation oncology departments have already become service departments where novel research is limited and little or no translational research occurs. They concluded that radiation oncology is underfunded by the NIH, and the current level of support does not match the relevance of radiation oncology. How about health physics? Oh, we got just in one of the previous talks, we had a very nice summary of the history of funding in health physics. And I'd look at it just from a slightly different lens. I won't repeat it. But what I'll say is, so we had good support in the pre-2000 era, then it got a little bit shaky and stopped about 1999. A stoppage, that's not good. There seemed to have been a gap till about 2005 when Congress appropriated money for to the DOE to support health physics, which didn't really work out very well. And then in 2008, this got moved to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. And I quote again here, not only has the NRC ably administered this program, but it has also brought needed assistance to both students and academic programs at colleges and universities throughout the entire country. So clearly, this mechanism can work, and it's getting high reviews here. This is from Don Connolly, who prepared this on behalf of the Health Physics Society, but obviously more is needed. What other factors affect the pipeline cost? As tuition goes up, all other things being constant, we're going to educate less students. And here you can see an interesting plot. So I should note that most higher education is provided by public institutions, not by private institutions. So we're going to look at data for public institutions. Here you can see from about 1987 to 2011, basically the cost of tuition. It's going way up. And we can see the state government expenditures on higher education going down. So the reason why tuition is going up so much, and this is a big issue for students entering health physics and medical physics programs, is because the states are divesting in higher education. In fact, there seems to be a race on between the states to see who can divest the fastest and the most. So we all read about tuition going up, and at least my gut feeling was, oh, it's probably the administrators are growing too fast. They're becoming a too big, expensive part of the university. There's too many new buildings, so on and so forth. It turns out that that's wrong. There's been a study done recently which found that about 80% of the cost, 80% of the increases in tuition were directly traceable to decreases in state support. So that's really what's going on there. And I guess I'd like to say a little something about the evolution of medical physics over the last, say, 20 years. I've been in the field about 30, I guess, and what I've seen is that it's undergoing an evolution, and there's a much bigger emphasis on professional aspects of medical physics, and this is a good thing. Particularly in terms of clinical care, there's been an increased emphasis on activities related to licensure, board certification, and maintenance of certification. And probably these are leading to higher quality and safer care for patients. But if you're doing that, you're not doing something else, right? So there probably is a cost here. Another recent change is in 2014, to become eligible for to sit for the board certification exam, you needed to have completed a residency program. So this is after you've completed your terminal graduate degree. You need to then enter a CAMPEP accredited medical physics residency program, 2-year program. So really what happened is most of our graduates will go on and do a residency instead of doing postdoctoral training. And this is going to have some long-term implications, I feel, for our field, which probably aren't receiving enough attention or thought. But the AAPM's past president, John Boone, actually named our annual conference last year Reinvigorating Scientific Excellence. And he did this because, and I quote, "I feel that AAPM has drifted a bit from its scientific roots. Many of us, myself included, need to rejuvenate our enthusiasm as scientists. I humbly suggest that one of the most important survival strategies that we collectively can adopt is to get better at what we do as scientists." Let me try to summarize for you some of the take-home points here from my talk. And again, this is just my perspective. I think really what's driving the demand for medical physicists will be the absolute incidence of cancer, and we're pretty darn sure that this is going to be increasing for at least the next decade. Everything else is a big unknown. We really don't know what's going to happen with healthcare economics. We don't know when and how the next scientific and medical breakthroughs will impact utilization of radiation. And these things are just very, very hard to predict. So we'll have to monitor these very closely and do this at regular intervals. This is, I guess, speculation, but it sure looks like the underfunding of research is not going to be fixed quickly, so we can anticipate to have to deal with that for some time yet. And I would have to say that the bottom line with medical physics now is that, at least for clinical medical physicists, and in the short term, that supply and demand seem to be balanced, and things are really in pretty good, actually very solid shape. So I'll close there. Thank you.